Okay. Hi, I'm Corrie Slawson.
I'm Karen Beckwith.
Welcome to Ping Pong Press. That's Rosie. Rosie. You hear? She makes her noise. So I started this shop in my basement here in my home. Gosh, how long ago now? I think 2016 I set it up. Actually set it up because I got a commission at the Columbus Public Library. This press came up for sale from the wonderful painter Bonnie Dolan. And so she sold me this press. This is an amazing 1973 Charles brand. Right, Karen? It's like really basic technology.
It's a workhorse.
It's a workhorse. Yes. So basically, I set it up around the idea of being able to have really just reliable, easy screen printing. And I'm an etcher, actually, by, my first love was intaglio. So getting an intaglio press sealed the deal like I'm putting in a shop. So obviously we're in a basement, that's why you got a dartboard for all your palette needs. We kind of went rec room with it. But also, I live with my husband and my son, and we're a ping pong family. And it's also the perfect size, big table, open space. And then Karen and I have just kind of been, I think it was like 2 years ago now, we slowly we started out with just that area and this drying area, and then we were able to add, I think in 2018 we added more storage and basically took over the entire basement. We do pretty tiny workshops in terms of the amount of people. It's almost a one-on-one. It's usually 3 people to Karen and I, but with COVID, and we are going to open back up this summer, especially once vaccinations get started, we are going to do 2 potted people, and Karen and I down here. We can open the windows, and we've got the CDC amount of square footage to safely distance down here, masked.
All right, so I'm Karen D. Beckwith, and the funny thing is I use my middle initial because there's many Karen Beckwiths in Cleveland. I'm a Tamarind Master Printer, and I have my shiny new apron just to wear for this event. So what we're going to show you today is aluminum plate lithography, and I did a drawing of Rosie, who's out in the back, of Shay Slawskowitz. We decided we should do Rosie for our demo. So what I'm working on is a aluminum plate, which is a ball-grained aluminum. It starts out as shiny, and it's a man-made texture to simulate a litho stone. But since we're using an etching press here, we can run the aluminum plate through the press and not a stone. So I have drawn with these specifically grease-based litho crayons, and a combination of making different kinds of marks by using this material. So the magic of litho is that grease and water don't mix, and so throughout this demo you will begin to understand how that process works. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do in preparation for drawing on the aluminum plate is file the edges. I have cut this plate down from a larger plate, so it has a burr on the sides where it was scored and bent and snapped, so it leaves just a little bit of a burr. So I'm going to take that off, which is real quick, way less filing than if I was doing a copper plate or a zinc plate, just enough to knock that burr off. And notice I'm not putting my hand on the plate. These plates and lithography is very grease sensitive, so unless I purposely want to print my fingerprints, which I don't, I keep something under my hand. I'm going to rinse the plate under hot water and wipe it with this is called a weave roll pad. It's very soft cotton pad that leaves no lint behind, and it won't scratch the plate. So we're going to run the plate under hot water. I will get this wet, and then I'm going to come over here. And then again, just try to keep my hands off of here, but you'll see what's coming off. Because these plates are aluminum, they have oxidized. So there's this, and that's just from sitting in the drawer over time. But I want to do this pretty much right before I'm going to start drawing on it, or within, preferably within the shortest amount of time, so it doesn't reoxidize. And then the final trick to this is that we dry it really fast, because if I was to just blot this and walk away and let it dry slowly, then it would reoxidize. So one final rinse. And then we use newsprint to blot it. I want to get most of the water off as fast as possible. Flip that over. And then, because I have tendonitis in my elbows and I don't want to run a hand fan, we'll just use a little baby fan.
I'll do a demo of the.
Yes, we have what's called the fancy fan.
Litho fan.
Fancy fan, as our Taiwan students called it, the fancy fan. But now this is good and dry. Dry and good to draw on. We're good to go. So we have prepared the plate to draw, and then we will have, I've shown you the finished drawing. And so the next step is to secure the image to the plate. And the way we do that is by etching, actually chemically etching, not physically etching as in intaglio, where a mark is incised into a plate. Lithography is a planographic process, so everything is happening on the surface. The grease drawing is on the surface of the plate, and if you look at it in a microscopic way, there's hills and valleys in this grain of the plate, and the grease is sitting on top of those bumps. And what I'm about to do, which is etch with a mixture of gum arabic and lemon juice, is to chemically etch the drawing into the plate. So the first thing we're going to do is put some, this is French chalk. It will just dry the image a little bit. Like my best analogy is, you wouldn't go out in the rain without your raincoat on. The talc offers just a little bit of protection from what I'm about to do next, which again is chemically etch the image into the plate. In terms of strength of etch, the weakest and the most commonly used is gum arabic. And then what I'm doing, because we are doing a greener approach to lithography here, because again we are in a domestic space, and I personally have been printing for, over 35 years, and I'm trying to limit my exposure to chemicals whenever possible. I'd like to print till I'm, 99 and a half or longer. So most of the etches are mixtures of gum arabic and then a quantity of lemon juice. So we're using lemon. I will use a little bit of plate etch, which is tannic acid, which is a more commercial etch. And side note to this, I had an experience during 2 of our summer workshops where I was getting sick by the end of the week, and what Corrie finally realized, thankfully, was that I was putting my hands in the tannic, and tannic can be absorbed through your hands, so I was getting nauseous by the end of the week. So one, don't put your hands in the tannic. I will use gloves, and ideally at some point I will not use this at all, but honestly I'm still understanding the nuances of etching with gum and lemon and getting better at it, but there's no standard. In lithography, traditionally it's very standard. There's certain amounts of etch that you would use and that I've learned to use, but they involve either phosphoric or nitric acid, which we're not using, and lemon does not translate in the same way. So I could get my lemon from Mark's, or I could get it from Heinen's, but there's no pH scale. It's just very different. So some of it and some of what I'm doing is very intuitive, so it's a little tricky. So I rely a little bit on this commercial plate etch because it has no VOCs, so it has no smell, so it's not making us, sick in terms of its smell, but definitely something that you want to wear gloves when using. So we use a little of that. So as I etch, I will start with straight gum arabic, and then what I'm looking for and assessing in the drawing is the value and the amount of grease that is on the plate. So Again, the gum arabic is the weakest etch, and then I will use a stronger etch for the darker areas. And this doesn't have anything that's super, super dark and contrasty, so I won't have to do a really, really strong etch. All right, so we start with the gum. I haven't used that in a minute. Just use a little bit more. And gum arabic is it's in foods we eat. Not that I'm going to spoon this in and have a little lunch, but it is okay for me to put in, and I can't help it. Some people think this is really gross. I love putting my hands in the gum. It's just like a really yummy. So, and I've learned, and I've done this since day one. I mean, I did my first lithograph in probably 1983. It was my first class outside of my major in art school was stone lithography. So I've been doing it for a very long time. And you'll notice I'm covering the whole plate. I'm not just doing the image area, because the other thing that the gum arabic does is it keeps the white areas white in the most basic sense. So I need to protect the entire plate with gum. I won't use, as I use the different strengths of etch, I won't need to do that in any of the negative areas because the gum arabic is protecting that. But I do want to get the whole plate.
The other thing I always just kind of say to my students too is that the gummed areas are the water-loving areas, so they stay white.
So they stay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. All right, so now, corner. I have 3 different etches mixed. You can see these. I have a quarter lemon to 3/4 gum, one that's 50-50, and then 3/4 lemon to a quarter gum. And the tannic acid falls, I think, in here. In terms of strength. So again, I'm assessing the image for the lights and darks. And it's not just about the value of the drawing, it's about how much grease is in there. And I know, since I drew this chicken, that I used a number 3s and 4 pencils. And the pencils are rated from 0 to 5, 0 being more greasy, 5 being less greasy. So I might not etch a number 5 black mark the same as a number 0 black mark, just because of the amount of grease that's laid down. So again, lithography has a lot of nuance to it, just because of the value of the grease that's being put on the plate. So I am going to use a little bit of the quarter lemon and gum. And sorry, I'm a lefty. I'm probably blocking your shot.
It's okay.
I mean, I'm not sorry I'm a lefty,
Yeah,
but
sure.
I am a lefty. So I'm looking for areas that are kind of a mid, I don't know, on a scale of 1 to 10, gray scale, like a 3. You know, the sort of lighter areas. But it also is not going to hurt. Again, the thing about lithography, I working from the weaker etch up to a stronger etch. I'm not going to do any damage to the darker areas if I accidentally get a weaker etch on them. It matters more if I have a stronger etch and I put it on a light mark, I could burn it out. So I'm being pretty liberal with where I put this at the moment. So the process is to put it on and then pick it up, and I use a sponge that's damp but squeezed out of water. I don't want to introduce any water at this point. If I did that, it could also damage the image. But I use the end of the sponge instead of just wiping it through. That way it picks it up, but it doesn't spread it around. And in the meantime, I'm just keeping an eye on this background of gum, making sure that it doesn't dry out totally. And so I'm going to do, and then I repeat. So it's sort of rinse and repeat. Do that. Each etch that I put on, I will put it on and take it off, and then apply it a second time. So now we're going to, I'm going to move up to the 50-50, which is a next stronger etch. And I have it in a bottle. I don't like to put it directly on where I'm etching, but I'll just put some in a puddle away. So now I'm going after these slightly darker. We've gone up a level on that value scale. I'm just looking at some of the darker areas that I drew, Miss Rosie. And again, the goal of the etch is to maintain the value of the drawing on the plate and, make it stay. Stay, don't get darker. And again, this is a crayon drawing, which is more forgiving than some of the, there's a wet media, which we will show you all on a sidebar here once, so Rosie can rest in between the first and the second etch. But again, I don't have any areas that are super, super dark, or that have, if you have a dark field that's got a lot of lights within that we need to go stronger. So I don't think I'm going to use the 3/4 lemon, 1/4 gum. I may go higher on the second time after we wash this out and roll up. 2 levels of etch, which I am feeling pretty good about for this plate. So then to finish and clean things up, I'm just putting a little more gum on the whole plate, again, because I had gum on all around the image area, and I don't want to, it gets really sticky and thick when it dries, if it dries too quick, which we don't want. So I will pick up the bulk of that gum with my sponge, and then I switch to a cheesecloth. This is also where the talc comes into play. It helps to keep the image from smearing when I buff it down. But I need to have a really tight film of gum for the next process, which is where we will remove the drawing material and replace it with ink. And I need this gum coating to be really nice and thin and smooth, not bumpy. I'm hitting a little, it's picking up, and this is not hurting the image at all. But again, if I had not put that talc, that French chalk on there, this would really smear. So that helps to secure the image. But yeah, really, this should be just smooth.
So elbow grease.
Elbow grease, yeah. And then we'll let this dry and pause here. It's good for it to have a little bit of a rest before we go to the next part. So we'll talk about some other ways to make marks on the plate while Rosie's resting here. So we're going to show you another way to make some marks onto the plate. And this process is more wet media, and the material is called tuche, T-U-S-C-H-E, not like tush, but tuche. And there's a few ways to get there. In Ping Pong Press, we're using a stick tuche. Corns makes one, and this one, which unfortunately we lost the lovely wrapper, but is a Charbonnel, so it's a little finer. And again, these are just really refined grease and pigment that we will dissolve in water, and then you can achieve a very specific lithographic mark, which is this reticulation. Imagine a puddle drying, and then the rings dissipate, and it leaves this lovely texture. So we'll show you some of that. And so Corrie's going to do a quick little demo on how we make teeth. And I'm going to do some again, elbow grease.
You can't be a weakling in printmaking. You have to, it's like hard work. I'm always really tired after we do these.
Maybe a little, it's probably good for,
This is good?
yeah, that's good for said demo. Yeah.
Alrighty.
So then, after the elbow grease, just a little bit of water. I used warm water just because it's cold. And I'm slowly dissolving the tuche. And the great thing about this fine china plate is that it's grippy. It grabs. You saw Corrie really working to get the tuche stick onto the plate. But I want to dissolve it in a really slow manner, because if I get too crazy, it kicks up bubbles, and we want the tuche to dissolve without a whole lot of bubbles in it, just because it affects the kind of mark that it would make. So I would do this until I've gotten all of the pigment off the plate. You can see there's still some under there. And my goal for this is to create a pretty black, and then I can dilute it into varying shades of gray, and then we're going to would apply it with a brush onto the plate, and then leave it there and just let it dry. I can't be in a hurry if I want to use tuche. You just have to walk away. I would lay the puddles down and just leave it and go have lunch or come back. Sometimes tomorrow. I mean, sometimes it needs overnight to dry. So then from that, you would get, and Corrie had done, we did a combination of transfer and tuche on her plate, and you can get a look at some of the lovely marks that the tuche makes.
Plate, I wanted to turn some of my collages into a litho series, which we abandoned a few years ago, but we're going to bring it back. But if you look really closely, you can see the dot pattern. And so what Karen and I use is Citrusolve. And we transfer toner-based, laser-printed copies onto the plate using this Citrusolve. We do dilute it. Again, Citrusolve is less toxic. It is biodegradable. However, it's got really high VOCs, and it smells like oranges. But you really want to use it in fresh air. Honestly, you don't want to be in, we don't really like to use it down here in the shop unless we know we're going to walk away because it's pretty strong. But it's strong enough to lift and move the toner-based copy onto this plate.
So
yeah, this is
important. This is the precious piece of material.
It is the precious.
It's wrapped like a baby.
It is the precious. Oh, I did make this box, by the way, to put my roller in, which goes in the case, which is over there on the shelf, which I also made. Because my one big gift to myself when I was at Tamarind was to buy my own leather roller, and which is an important tool to have in litho. And these rollers are handmade, not by me. I did not make the rollers, but a former Tamarind Master Printer, Craig Cornwall, he's out in Washington State, I believe, makes these. I think he still makes them. And it's kept wrapped up because of the leather roller yarn. You only, can you just pin that up somewhere? I won't get my hands on it. I only use black ink in it, and it's never cleaned, except for to scrape old ink out, which I may do real quick once I see how it's doing. And the roller is made, the leather is turned inside out, so you can see the stitching here of how this piece of leather, and there will be a seam, so there's a seam there, so it's leather that's been turned inside out. I did condition this myself. When I got it, it just looked like raw leather, so you work it through a series of oils and then varnish, and then you introduce ink into the varnish. This takes like a month or so to break in a roller, so labor of love, truly. so we'll just see how this looks at the moment. So it's got some ink in it. Since I haven't used it in a minute, I might just do a quick scrape so you can see what I would do in between adding new ink. And so I'll use this is actually a frosting knife that one of my teachers gave to me. And the way you do this, Corrie, can you grab me just that phone book down there, please? Is get it in your gut. And so I'm pulling some of the old ink out, and this is just because I haven't used it in a minute. And we'll put fresh ink in there. But these rollers this roller will last my lifetime as long as I take good care of it, which I do. Okay, so after scraping, I took some of the older ink off the surface. We're going to roll up a nice slab of ink. One of my go-to inks is a Graphic Chemical Litho Shop Mix Black. This is a nice balance between a stiff ink without being too stiff and not so loose. There's also a roll-up black that is very loose and very greasy, but for this kind of delicate image, I want an ink that's got more body to it. And litho ink is generally fine, at least in terms of the black ink, is perfect right out of the can if it's a good ink. The color inks we have to modify, but the black ink we don't. And it's still stiff. Well, it's been chilly, right? And I always keep a hand on my roller, and this is something I would always teach my students. Don't ever, ever, ever walk away from your roller on the slab without putting it back in the box. If this baby falls and hits the floor, it could ruin it. And you were talking, I don't know, probably at this point a $400 roller. Squirrely. Yeah. All right.
Want me to do it? I'm happy to.
Just get it started.
Okay.
So the reason for this fancy spin is that the goal is to even out the ink from left to right as well as top to bottom. So, I mean, the alternative is to do something like this, which is way more dangerous because I could drop the roller. So I learned this, and I teach this at Tamarind, and we teach it to the students, so that you can rotate the roller without ever letting go of it. So I'm going to let Corrie run this out for me for a minute, because we're going to try to even that out, just because my elbows hurt.
I'm not as good as she is, but I am strong.
The next part is it's called a washout roll-up, is the next step. So for that, we are using, it slightly came off of here, Estisol 242, which is coconut based. Instead of, it is replacing lithotine. So in traditional lithography, we would use lithotine, which is imagine turpentine with a little oily, right, to remove the drawing material. Because this next step is removing the drawing material and replacing it with ink. So this is the magical moment of lithography. It's like, ooh, the most favorite part. Because it's just kind of crazy to understand if you've never seen it before. So actually,
and Estisol is 0 VOC, does not have a flash point, and is made from coconut-based esters in the Netherlands.
So I'm using, and again, we've been trying to use rags, not paper towels, just to recycle old things. Textiles.
Yeah.
So what this is going to do is remove the grease. So what's happened, we have a layer of gum, and that grease drawing is underneath, and it will come through. So the gum layer that I had buffed down at the end of the last session when we paused is still there. The grease is coming through the gum. So it's leaving essentially this stencil of the image that has been chemically etched into the plate. So we can see that Rosie's still there, but what's coming away is all the drawing material, and we will replace that with ink. And I'm not scrubbing. I don't want to scratch the plate. I mean, the plate is sensitive to scratching, so we want to make sure, I'm using probably one of Mark's old t-shirts. Thank you, Mark. And I want to get all of that black out. Yeah, you can get up on there and see that she's there. But this is often where students are terrified, like, where'd it go? Well, it's still there. It's the magical moment in lithography. All right, so now, since we've removed the drawing material, we're going to replace it with ink, but I have a very naked plate here, so it's in a vulnerable state. So what I'm going to do, I need to put some grease base back into the plate. And traditionally we would use asphaltum, which is a petroleum-based product, also not good, not something we want to be using. So I use the ink itself, and it also offers a little bit of protection to the image. I could, because we will also introduce water next, which makes it also very vulnerable. So just a little, again, I don't need a whole lot. And I'm putting the ink into the image area only. I don't need to buff the ink into the entire plate. I'm only going over the area with the image where I've drawn. So this fills up those little grease reservoirs where the drawing was and gives the ink a place to land, and again offers some protection to the image, which is vulnerable at this point. Excuse me, just because we've taken all the drawing away. And this layer also I want to buff in really well, much like the gum. So really pushing that grease into the drawing. So now the water moment. Get these close.
This is what you want to get on camera.
The water moment.
The water moment. It's the
So
magic
now,
time.
again, the basic premise of lithography is grease and water don't mix, and so this is where the water comes in. I'm going to rinse the whole plate, and this I'll move fast and probably not talk so much, but which will lift a little bit of the top layer of gum, exposing the drawing, and then I'll apply ink. But because the estisol is a little greasy, I have to go through a couple of sponges to pick up some of the residue of the estisol before I start rolling, because we learned that if I don't do that, we have kind of a scummy mess. So this is also the point that you will really see rosy again. Water on. And we don't want to leave the water sitting there very long. Again, the image is pretty vulnerable at this point, so I just want to get it cleaned off. So we can start rolling. I'll give these to you. Get these off. And then we switch to a cleaner sponge. And at this point, I will leave this plate a little bit damp. I don't want the plate to dry out because it would oxidize again. Back to that oxidation issue.
Let me know if you want me to roll up at all, Karen.
I think I'm good. Let's see how Rosie does. And it's important to roll in a couple different directions too. Again, we have these grease dots on the plate. She's scumming a little bit. I'm happy about that. So I want to roll from two different directions. So what I'm watching is I want the blacks to be black, right? We want her to look like she did when I started the drawing. She's looking good, but you can tell that like everything's just kind of overall gray, right? So we need a little more ink is all. But I always like to caution to err on the side of caution, to not over ink an image too soon. Then I think we're probably good. And I also roll slower. The speed of the rolling matters if I'm trying to, I can just go back in the box.
Okay.
If I'm trying to lay it down, I would roll slower. If I'm trying to pick some up, I might speed up a little bit. I think I'm going to stop there. I think she's good, and then we're going to need to deal with this scum situation that's happening. And again,
I mean, she is a chicken and they are dirty.
well, sure, that could just be I'd like some of that. I'd like some of that to go away, which I will
Yes.
get. We can clean that out.
That'll go away.
All right, so now, we've washed out, removed the drawing material, replaced it with ink, and the next step will be to do a second etch, which is a stabilizing etch. So imagine it's just like, okay, I want to put the brakes on here. I want this image to stay like this and not get any darker. I could take this to the press right now and print it. I could print one or two, but it would continue to get darker because we haven't put the second etch on. So we will dry this with the fancy electric fan so we don't kill our elbow. At this point, we just need it to dry quick. Again, if I let it dry slow, then the plate would oxidize and cause more scum than we already have to deal with, so we don't want that. So this will dry up pretty quick. So the plate is dry, so we're almost back to where we started after the drawing was done. So I'm going to use the French chalk / talc to dry the image again. We just need a little bit before I apply the second etch. Again, this is attaching itself to now the ink instead of the dry material to help that dry. And I will buff this in, and then we'll come back and do the second etch. So it's going to look much like the first etch, but what I'm assessing is, did the image get darker or lighter, and that determines how I apply the second etch. I'm feeling pretty good about how she rolled up, other than the random scum around the edges that I'm trying to deal with. But as far as the image itself, I feel like she looks pretty much like a doer, which is what I'm after. And then it's actually good that the plate will rest for at least a half an hour, for that etch to marinate in there a little bit. And more so with using the lemon, I'm less confident in doing it, blowing through the steps too quickly. I'd rather it get to sit a little bit. With the traditional etch, which uses phosphoric acid, you can blow through it pretty quick. And I also like to work, ideally, having the etch right in my hand. So you can see I can move around the plate. I'm not trying to drag it from somewhere else. And you may have noticed I'm using the same brush, but again, as long as I go from weaker etch to stronger etch, it's all right that I use the same brush. All right, then we finish with just a little bit of fresh gum. I need to cut this bottle open a little bit more. And then we'll buffer down with a cheesecloth. And gum is very sticky. Alright, so this is a spot that we can pause, take a break, and have some lunch. So now we're ready to print. So in order to print, we need to prepare our paper. And traditionally in lithography, the most simple but very effective registration system is called T and bar. And the reason it's called that, and we'll just show you this example, and then I'll walk you through how we get here. On the plate itself, we have imagine a capital T that is scratched into the plate, and that will line up with a lowercase baby t on the back of the paper. And then at the other end, there's a bar on the plate here, and then we'll have a corresponding bar that we put on the back of the paper, in the middle of the paper. So now I'm going to show you how we get those marks on the plate and decide where they go and how they get there. So I had, in my Martha Stewart way, had made a template ahead of time. So what I did on this piece of Mylar was draw out the size of the paper. We're using Stonehenge, which is a little shorter. Sometimes the BFK is a little longer, so I had options. But I taped the Mylar down where I want our image area to be to print. So I need to transfer the T and bar marks to the plate. And how we do that is with a red iron oxide sheet. And my favorite little ruler is to use my ink knife or my putty knife, because all I need to do is transfer the top line and the cross of the T on the paper. And again, that hand is in the way. And then we'll do the same on the bar, and I'm going to this first line. So now you can see I have my red iron oxide marks on the plate. But remember, we have a coating of gum on the plate, and this is chalk-like, so it would wash right off. So now I just need to scratch it into the plate. So now I'm just going to scratch the mark into the plate, because otherwise it would just wash away, disappear. Same, I like my little putty knife. And it's aluminum. I'm not digging deep. I don't want to kick up a big burr. Even at that, it's going to pick up a little bit of ink as we print. But so then we do the cross. And this registration system is is very accurate. I can and have done multi-layer prints with this type of registration system. And as long as I refer back to the initial Mylar, the original one, and keep using those same marks from that same layout, they're going to line up fine. We're going to mark where the center of the paper is, just with that small T and that small bar. So what I do is I mark the bottom, usually with these little dots line up, and then the top, and line up the top and the bottom. We'll get a couple, we'll have to shift this. So the T is the top and the bar is the bottom, right? So T top, bar bottom. And we're good to start printing. Pause. So, like I said, we're ready to print, and reminder that we are using this lovely Charles brand etching press to print a litho. So because we are using an etching press and not a litho press, we will be doing the water component and the roll up on the ink slab and then moving the plate. Because traditionally the litho press, the plate or stone stays on the press and doesn't move. But because we're on an etching press and we don't want to get water into the workings of the press, we will be moving it. So for any of you who know litho and go, what are they doing? This is why. So we're going to start over here.
Also, we don't use a blanket. We use this board, and it kind of recreates the tympan. So,
right, we're doing it's a rolling kind of pressure on the etching press. Again, like Corrie said, instead of using the tympan, which is a scraping kind of pressure, that's where the board comes into play. But we need as much pressure as we can get in order to get a good impression from the plate. And that's why this Charles brand press works great for that.
Is that water?
It's just water. What I try to do, because we have to move the plate, I can't tape it down because I have to get it off of here. So my goal is to create some suction under here so that when we roll it, it doesn't move. And that just takes a minute. It's not bad. We'll be cautious on the first roll. But first I have to wash it out. Mm-hmm. So you can hang out a second. Mm-hmm. So when we come to print, we are essentially repeating the washout phase of the process. So we did the first etch, wash out, roll up, second etch. So we're going to remove the ink that's in here and then start with fresh ink and then start proofing from there. And this is the same, I would do the same process if I was printing in red or blue or yellow, any color, but we always printed black first to see how the image is coming up. And I keep here. We're washing out with Estisol, right? So again, we'll see the ink. This time now we're in ink. Start to wash out, right? All that loveliness. And I always find that once the plate is in ink and not the dry material, it takes a little longer to wash it out. Mm-hmm. And that's just typical. It's just... So again, I'm just taking a little bit of the ink off the putty knife because I've removed all the grease yet again, and we have to put it back before we start rolling with the ink. And that stuff is extra stiff today.
It really is.
And the Estisol is oily enough, so I'm just kind of dabbing some of the ink around before I start buffing it in here. But I didn't have to add more Estisol. I'm just using that little bit of film coating that's left there, and then we'll buff it in really good. Now we're back to water. So we're going to lift all of the ink, excess ink, get this on, get the water off. I'm going to make a big mess here. Switch. Some nice new sponges. All right, Corrie.
Which way you want me to go?
Start this way, and then we'll have you come this way.
Okay. So how many rolls?
Just do an up and back, and
Okay.
back to the slab.
All
We're
right.
gonna let her come up a little slow here. Plus, yep, back. Go back to the slab. Because we were having some scumming, I'm just being a little
Yeah.
extra cautious about how we start. And the other thing that's different when we're preparing to print is the goal is not to get the plate to look like we drew it right away. We're going to start proofing it. So we will develop a pattern of rolling. So I have Corrie rolling this way, side, front, side, front, and then we'll pull a proof. So
Okay.
since we're only doing up and back,
Yep.
we'll do it like 4 times.
Okay.
And then we want to keep repeating that pattern. The lovely thing about litho is that the printer becomes the machine. They called me the machine at Tamarind, but it's about emulating that machine, the commercial machine, in that you can have an edition of prints that are precisely the same if you ink it the same way every time. So that's why we developed this systematic way of rolling. Be clear, I can't see. This is the curse of the glasses. And we'll pull the proof.
Okay.
And she's going to be light, I know. But let's do one. And we may then also need to put more ink on the slab. So my goal with sponging is to leave just a little film of water on, but I don't want the plate to be really wet because the paper would suck all that up and it would leave all kinds of streaky marks. So we're going to take her to the press. And we start with newsprint. These are big enough. We'll do 2 newsprints. And then this lovely board that came when we bought the plates, so it's perfect for this.
And usually someone has to give it the old.
Once we get her going. Feel that a little bit?
A little bit, yeah.
We'll see nothing should have changed really.
No, I know.
So she's alright. That can kind of hang out there. Wow, really so light there's nothing there. Okay, so clearly we need more ink. Yeah, that's good. There you go. Yeah, in lithography, the sponging is as, if not more important than the rolling sometimes, because the person that's sponging is watching when she can see what's happening on the plate. And the person that's inking is minding the ink slab, and I mean, she's also watching, but traditionally in that sort of sponger roller printer roll, the sponger is really watching what's happening on the plate and saying, hey, if there's a problem, like, okay, hey, it's doing this, or there you go.
That laid more down.
Much better.
Yeah.
Let's do one more, then I think we're all right to prove.
The proof? Okay.
But yeah, I might throw a piece of something in there just to give us a little more pressure
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like it was maybe not quite as tight as it should be.
Yeah.
And I don't like to tighten it, but sometimes we can pad it.
We're doing a proof. Doing a proof.
We're doing another proof. All right, Rosie.
Alright, where is he? Watch out.
Yeah, I got it. Good morning. Got you with it. It like to spit out a little bit, so I'm sorry.
Oh, there we have her.
She's coming. So very light. So we clearly need, and you can look. I gotta get water
Yep.
on this, and push the press bed back to the core.
Yep.
Yeah, she's looking better. But again, I like to sneak up on the image. If we had overreacted and said, "Oh, we need way more ink,"
Yep.
right away, then
Scum.
it was scum, which she is a little bit, but or also don't
Doesn't
want
look
it.
like it's printing though.
No. And and there's some really nice subtleties in this drawing that I don't want to fill in. So I generally tend to err on less ink and let's let it build up. But that's what the proofing process and the newsprint is for. We'll keep doing that until she looks pretty good, and then we'll go to good paper. she's looking good. I see one more roll. We'll
Okay.
let's pull one more newsprint.
One more double this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, oh yeah. A little spit out there.
Yeah.
Oh, she's coming. She's coming. Still a little light. We can put that in the rack. I need to get that back.
I got it.
Bring back those other
Yep.
back newsprints. Okay. So we're going to do a proof on a good piece of paper with our registration marks, and the way it goes is right to left. So always top to bottom, and I put the T down first because what I'm doing is lining up, ooh, with my finger that doesn't want to go down there. The T, the little T with the big T, so those two line up. Then I let go of that, and I'm looking at where the bar is and put that down and look at that. So that way it's where we want it to be. And we'll do a couple pieces of newsprint. I think I want 2, not 3 for this. A little bit of padding and cover there. Okay. And chances are this will be light. I would say the first impression on good paper is almost 99% of the time light. But we need to transition into the good paper or the image will just keep getting darker if we continue to print it on newsprint. So at some point we have to transition to good paper. It's now or never.
Not bad.
Again, she's there, she's light, we know we need a little more ink, and that will come. But this is the proofing process. This is what's going to happen. She'll continue to get a little darker. She's coming a little stay.
Do you want these?
Now let's
They're kind of
set those aside.
dirty.
We can use them for other things.
Yeah.
Move that up a tad. Oh, she's coming. Nice.
Yeah, starting to get.
Yeah. Tad bit salty, but passable. Almost.
No, but it's coming up. You're starting to see a difference between even like the pressure, right? Like
Yeah.
tail feathers, tail feathers.
Oh, now I'm sweating. Put my sweatshirt back on. Now I don't need it. I really want to. Can you hold that up?
Yep.
I want to move this, but not.
Move it. Move it, but not move it.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, it's all hinky.
Oh yes, yeah. It's the pressure. We push. This
Oh wow. Yeah. Holy. Look at that. It's jumped.
Oh, it's yeah.
Quite.
Fix that. I know we ask a lot of this.
We ask a lot.
We'll put that back. That's better. So you can see.
Yep.
I gotta wet it, but 'cause I definitely.
We do have some scumming printing,
I know, I need a nice sponge stick on that. That was my fault.
but this is what you're looking for. I love it.
Well, now where's
Maybe
Olive? Come
focus
on,
on the
Olive.
scummy one.
Olive. Come on, Olive. Okay, okay, come on. Come on. Okay, okay. Oh, look at all your Did you see that? No.
It's a real excitable. Here.